Welcome, dear audience, to Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture's first live presentation of 2021. We'd like to welcome Oualid Mouaness, writer, director, and co-producer of 1982, a film we hope most, if not all of you, have had a chance to watch. Oualid Mouaness is an accomplished cineast of nearly 2 decades, including as a producer and director. I will ask Joseph Fahim to properly introduce you, dear audience, to Director Mouaness, and I will duly introduce Joseph Fahim shortly. I will mention that 1982 is his feature film directorial debut, one which has caused such a substantial splash, whose wave Director Mouaness is surely to adroitly serve to his next big successful project, which we, in turn, in Al-Bustan, look forward to hosting in due time and to inviting Oualid Mouaness back for a discussion about it. Perhaps by then, we will be ready to screen your film in a proper cinema, which would certainly enhance the effect of such a screening. Yet, we are thankful for the reach that online streaming enables. People have signed up to watch a screening of 1982 from as far as California, and we've learned from even outside the borders of the United States. Many have joined us from rural communities in which 1982 would have likely never screened cinematically. Moreover, perhaps we should recognize that in 2021, people have become so accustomed to watching films on personal devices to have entirely normalized such viewing, even for the most discriminating. If a fastidious and once highly scornful David Lynch can change his mind about watching a movie on a phone, I imagine we could. I would like to profusely thank our funders and donors, without whose support we would not be positioned to bring you such arts programming. These include foundations, the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services, the Ford Foundation, the National Network of Arab American Communities, the Local Initiatives Support Corporation, PNC Arts, the Philadelphia Foundation, the Samuel S. Fells Fund, and the William Penn Foundation, as well as federal, state, and local government entities, the Philadelphia Council on the Arts, the Philadelphia Cultural Fund, and the U.S. Small Business Administration. I would be remiss not to thank all of the individual donors whose support has long sustained Al-Bustan with care and commitment, including audience members graciously joining us today. We welcome your donations. I wish to express our sincere gratitude to Utopia Distribution for generously donating 120 screenings of 1982 to Al-Bustan's audience and constituency. I would like to conclude by introducing today's discussion moderator, Joseph Fahim, an Egyptian film critic, columnist, and programmer. He is the Arab delegate of the Carlo Vivari Film Festival, a former member of Berlin's Critic Week, and the ex-director of programming of the Cairo International Film Festival. He co-authored various books on Arab cinema and has contributed to numerous outlets in the Middle East, including Middle East Institute, Al Monitor, Al Jazeera, Egypt Independent, BBC, and The National, along with international film publications such as Verite and Mubi. To date, his writings have been published in 5 different languages. I wish to add to this official bio that Joseph Fahim, to my mind, is the best Arab critic writing in the English language. I encourage our audience members to share their comments and questions via the enabled chat feature and enthusiastically leave moderation of today's discussion in your capable hands, your Ustad Joseph. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for Al-Bustan for hosting this event and for providing a platform for engaging in this discussion. There's always a problem of contextualizing Arab cinema in the US. Curatorially, discussion-wise, almost like every element, something seems to be missing in the US. And it's very exciting what Al-Bustan is doing right now for having a proper platform, not only for movie screenings and for discovering the latest in Arab cinema, but providing really concrete discussions on Arab cinema. So anyhow, without any further ado, we hope you all, first of all, enjoy the movie, and please, you're welcome to send us any comments while we're doing the discussion. But first of all, the lingering question that a lot of people are asking about you is, why did it take you so long to make a movie? You've been making like you studied film and you've been working in the field for more than 2 decades, and most people do not know this, but you're a very accomplished and a top music video producer who did several amazing award-winning music videos, including for artists such as Lady Gaga and David Bowie and many others. Yeah, so but you studied film and you've been meaning to make a movie for many, many, many years. Why did it take you this long, and why then?
First of all, I really want to thank Al-Bustan Seeds for putting this together. I think it's an amazing institution. It's new to me, and I think the mission is amazing, and I love that this film is a part of this, and it's part of the initiative. So that's one. Two, why did it take me this long? I don't believe it took me this long. The reason is, as a director and a writer, yes, it did take me quite a while to actually get to the point where I actually wrote and directed my own films. And I started by doing a short film and then a feature, and then this feature in 1982, and both of which are Lebanese. As a producer, I've produced numerous projects internationally that I've participated in, and I feel very much also, for me, they were very satisfying experiences as a filmmaker, mostly documentaries, and a film that I did back in 2000, which premiered at South by Southwest. So, and I feel this is sort of a sum of my career between starting with a movie called Kitchen Privileges, where I edited and co-produced with a very wonderful group of people, and then moving into a documentary called Rise, which we premiered at Sundance in 2006, 2005, and then a few other movies in between until I arrived at 1982. So it was a progression for me. I needed to be ready to tell this story, and somehow I feel that this film had to take its course because I had to have my distance from it as material. And I wanted to make material about Lebanon and that represents a Lebanon that I knew, a Lebanon that not many people see. And I don't know, maybe I didn't have the maturity before, but I learned a lot from how engaged even creatively as a producer I was in all of the projects that I've done before. So yes, it took a long time, but in the scheme of my progression, my career, I feel like it was the right time.
There has been numerous movies about the Civil War that have been done along the years. It has been almost like the recurrent, most dominant topic of Lebanese cinema for the past 30 years or so. Why did you feel that for your first movie that this should be the main subject? And were you concerned about like any possible comparisons to other movies? I mean, there's of course, you know, West Beirut, which is another movie about during the Civil War, Ziad Doueri, and it's also about children. So yeah, why did you feel also like it was very imperative for you to do it right now? And how long did it take you to do? How long did it take you to write the project?
1982, I wrote it. Actually, I wrote the first draft of it quite quickly in 2011, 2012, and then I did minor revisions throughout. Structurally, it really remained quite intact from the first draft, which was part of the Sundance project. It took a very long time to finance, to get the film greenlit for filming. So by the time I started writing to the time I got the film to Toronto, it was 8 years. So, but I was doing other stuff in between as well. So, and the film had to be shot during a summer. So if you didn't manage to shoot that summer, then you needed to shoot another, then you had to wait a year. So I had to go back to my normal life for 6 months and then come back again and try to do it the next year. So it wasn't easy in that regard. But I also feel that the film sort of matured, and I think I became more grounded in the material over time as well. As to, was I afraid of it being compared to other films? I don't think of films like that. I mean, I think a lot of people like to think about films and comparing them to other films. I just felt, one, it's a story I wanted to tell. For me personally, it's a moment in time in Lebanon that was very historic, that changed the course of history, not only in Lebanon, in the Middle East as a whole, in terms of the Arab-Israeli conflict. But then for me, my experience of this whole thing was not that big thing. My experience was how lives got interrupted and how our lives got interrupted. And I felt this is what nobody knows, is that everybody gets impacted. And I needed to tell the story from a very human standpoint. And a standpoint from a place that I also was very familiar with as a kid. So, and that enabled me to be true to it. As to why this story in particular as well, it's a time in Lebanon, and it's a moment in our history that's never been put to film in a fictitious manner, even though it's based on true events, as in the whole situation of the invasion. The story itself is very personal. It's based on an experience, and it needed to be told, and it needed to show us as Lebanese people for how we experienced this, because not everybody always participates in a war. So this was very important, but yet we're impacted. I love West Beirut. I love Incendies, which are films, I think these are the two films that really head on also delve into dealing with the Lebanese wars. And there's so many points of views that one could take. I needed to take the one that I did. And the language and the way the film is, every film has its own, almost commands its own language and its own way of being told. And I was not afraid, or I didn't even think that it would be compared to this film or that film. I think every film that I've made before as a producer, and every film that I've made, even my short and this feature and my next films, each will stand and command its own language. And I have to trust that material, and I have to listen to it. So I have to put the material before I put myself as a director as well, and as a storyteller.
Were you ever also concerned about the question of relevancy? Because the question of relevancy or urgency, because simply put, you know how it is, like what's happening with Arab cinema right now is, or like for the past decade or so, is it's almost successive reactions towards what's happening, which is, of course, I mean, the cinema of the region seems to be attracting a lot of Western audience simply for its politics and not for like different stories like yours. And yeah, this is like, were you ever concerned that some may deem the story not relevant enough or not like urgent enough or any of that? Or, some could have even have said that, okay, like the Civil War had ended 30 years ago and there is no relation to what's happening with the present now.
Was I ever concerned about the relevance of the film? Not really, because I mean, clearly I made the film because I felt it was very relevant and very important for us. First and foremost, I didn't think about the film in the context of the entire world and what the world wants to see of Arabic cinema or of Lebanese cinema, for that matter. My primary audience thinking about this is I wanted the Lebanese people to see themselves in this story. I wanted them to be familiar with these characters because these characters are characters that we all know. So that in and of itself for me makes the film relevant. My concern was this audience. If I can reach the hearts of the Lebanese people, if I can get them to say, yes, this is what we experienced, this is what we lived through. Though it's tough to watch, it's important to remember, which is also very important for me in this film, in the making of this film, is to remember that this happened so it doesn't happen again. So that keeps the film relevant. On an international scale, some people were like, oh, this is like another war film. Quite honestly, you can decide if it's a war film or it's not. It is actually a war film of sorts, but it's not just another war film. It's its own human experience of something. It's for me, it's like, it's the same as I think this is a magnificent film that I'm going to mention, but basically Life is Beautiful and the impact that movie had in terms of just as a movie. It's a story of this kid and the situation. It's a story of a kid in the scheme of this bigger thing. And that's when you put a story, when a story becomes about people, it loses its irrelevance. It's always relevant, because throughout history, the love stories are the same stories. We feel our heart breaks, we love, we fall in love, we're not allowed to love. Like, these are part of our narrative history as humans, wherever we are in the world. So the thing is, you can't make people, if people are looking for what's in or what's relevant, then that's what they're looking for. But my intention with cinema is really, it should be this. I mean, you don't tell a writer of a novel what novel to write. I don't understand why in cinema it has to be that it has to be relevant, because it's really in the way it's told that makes it relevant or not, that makes it relatable or not.
I mean, I personally, what I loved about the film is, I mean, remove the war, and this is still to a very humanistic story of a bunch of children trying to get by in a school day. It's set against very extraordinary circumstances. And I think, like, replace war or strike, I mean, there's something very specific about it, which is great, but yeah, like, replace this by any catastrophic event, and you would almost have the same universal reaction. But I have, like, one of the things you were mentioning is one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning of the film is that the movie is based on a true story. So yeah, like, how much of it were you one of the kids? Were you, like, how close it is to reality?
How close it is to reality? I'll just say one thing that was I actually wrote a much naughtier note to this girl in my class, but I was younger. I was in fourth grade. And I told, my love note to that girl was, I want to make love to you. So of course that got to the teacher. And then my mom got called into.
How old were you?
I was like 8, 9. Oh. And I wrote it to a girl in my class, and my mom got called into the school, and it was, and she's like, "What am I gonna do with you?" So really, for me, like the love note thing. One, I used to draw. I used to not draw very well, but I used to be obsessed with grandizers. So I used to do.
You want to explain what grandizer is?
Yeah. Yeah, on my love notes, but like.
No, do you want to explain what grandizer is?
Pardon?
Do you want to explain what grandizer is?
Yes. Okay, so in Lebanon, well, in the Arab world in general, there's
we had it, yeah, in Egypt.
In Egypt as well, I think. Growing up, there was this anime character, superhero, sort of a transformer type superhero that we were really, really obsessed with, and he is this superhero that really just saves the planet and protects this planet. It's an anime show. I was obsessed with him, and even as a kid, I kind of wanted to create my own. And this is really what also kind of I brought into the film. And the interesting thing is, I was always interested in the geometrics of it, but never in the actual shading and drawing of it. So I was never really the perfect in terms of how I drew. But that's where that came from, and it was dubbed into Arabic, and we used to watch it every Wednesday, and we would talk about it at school on Thursday, all of us together, what happened, you know. And there were these 10-minute anime episodes that were made in Japan by Go Nagai, and they're really also about this superhero, that this robot that sort of protects protects this planet. So that's what it is. Yeah. Anyway, going back to the notes, yes, I got in trouble for notes. I was more Majid than I am Wissam, though I was sort of the but like I was the kid that got in trouble the year before that the girl mentions. Almost got expelled. So and punished. Yeah. But that's
okay. One of the fascinating things about the film as well, what was like very refreshing about it is there are no poor crying children in your movie.
There are no poor crying children in the movie.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's basically it's
real.
I think what was like shocking, I think for a lot of people that I've spoken to, you know, like the kind of Arab movies that are being exported are, you know, there are specific themes, and you like with specific representation that you get to see, and even with Lebanese movies, also you get the kind of like rich folks that you get to see in Lebanese movies are usually like the corrupt Frenchy Christians, or like, I mean, there's always like a very definite representation of what you see in Arab films, whereas yours is essentially about upper middle class kids in an American school who are not poor and who do not cry. So,
well, just to go back to my experience of that moment in time, I don't remember everybody in the classroom crying. I remember only a couple of kids crying or being very concerned, and that was interesting because I think we happened to be not under the bombs to the point that it pushed people to cry as much as people to be a little bit afraid. So I wanted to be as realistic as possible to this. And one of the things that I just think that what I strived for in this film is to be as true as possible and as honest as possible. And somehow in situations like this, even us as kids and as people, you have to act. You almost don't have time to cry, you know. So that for me is one thing, and two, I didn't want to. I just don't think that seeing crying kids is as real for me, because kids are strong. And I needed to really let them lead me here more so than I led them in some way. We can get into that. That's a whole other conversation in terms of how I worked with the kids, because I need to understand them emotionally. But they knew where they needed to go. The reality that I know of Lebanon from 1982, just to be very, very specific, economically, 1982 Lebanon is very different than economically Lebanon today. I needed to be true to what Lebanon was in 1982 economically, and the majority of society was middle class to upper middle class. There was lower class, and but generally the
economy was more solid. It
was very solid.
Yeah.
It was very solid. It was regarded a very affluent country at the time, and the currency was very strong. And to be quite honest, in the school that I was in, which is actually the school where I shot the movie, which has a history of being a Quaker school. It was the first Quaker school in the Middle East, which means there were people literally in my classroom from all religions and all classes, and this was something that was not very common. I was very fortunate to be a part of that, and this was something that that also in our household we grew up with, in that you don't judge people based on their religion or their wealth. This is because my family comes from quite humble beginnings, and I'm proud of that, and then that really drove much of the narrative for me, is my awareness of that world. So even though if one looks closely at the cars per se, the cars are representative of classes of society. The cars are not all upper class cars. It's just, you know, and uniforms in the schools that we went to were actually specifically put in place so that people not differentiate who's rich or who's poor. Mm-hmm. This is the principle of uniforms. That way, everybody's equal. And so I really, that for me was very important. And I just feel like I needed to show Lebanon for who we are and the people for who we are. And somehow, some people did not, and I know some people were like, whoa, wait a minute, there's no misery in this film, there's no poor people in this film, there's no this. I'm like, these are the real people that, according to a lot of the world, are not worth making a story about. But at the end of the day, this is such a human story that it doesn't matter. Wars impact people who are under the bombs and outside of the bombs. I mean, this film, the experience in this film has been experienced in almost every warring nation in the world. And one of the very interesting things about, this goes back to one of the reasons I made this film, is in Lebanon, we value education. And one of the first things that goes in wars is education. It gets disrupted and then it gets redirected. And so for me, somehow, like, it's very important to press this. And as you know, Joseph, in Lebanon, education is very, very highly prized. Like people just don't put food on the table, but would rather send their kids to the best school possible. I mean, this is the only thing that's kept Lebanon alive. And that's kept actually a lot of the Arab world alive. It's kept the Palestinian diaspora alive. They're overeducated, Iraqi diaspora, Iraq, like, people value education, because the moment you take education away is the moment you impoverish people, not only physically, but so this film really completely counteracts this. And I just want people to understand and to be empathetic, because a lot of the films that have come out of the Middle East use sympathy, and I just don't think it's the correct emotion for who we are. That's
rather sensationalism.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. Love the film, especially the cinematography and how the impending doom was seen through the eyes of the kids, teachers, and parents. Did you purposely stay away from the politics of the situation?
That I purposely stay away from the politics of the situation. I stayed subtle in the politics of the situation. I did not stay fully away of the politics of the situation. And I think upon second viewing, it's an interesting thing, because the film, I wrote the film in layers, and there's a lot to read upon first viewing. The politics in the film are subtle, but they exist, and they exist in the broken relationship of the adults, which is actually the reason that the relationship is broken. It's basically the geopolitics, to be more specific. And that starts right at the beginning with Yasmin's brother, and then it carries through even subtly in the geopolitical maps that exist in the film throughout, and then the fact that Yasmin and Joseph blow up, even though they're both of the same religion. It just really, there's the left and there's the right. So I just felt like the politics was not as important in terms of the didactic aspect of it, as much as the impact that it has. And I was approaching this from I really narrowed my lens on purpose into the repercussions of the politics rather than the politics themselves. Because the giant war is impacting everything, all the way to a family, to a household, to a marriage. So, does that make sense?
It does. We have one comment from the audience. One of the most beautiful films I've seen in a long while, a powerful and sensitive young love story set against the heartbreaking backdrop of the impending war. I have a question from a spectator Brazilian friend, and it has to do with the ending, actually. And she said that the movie has a lot to do with relationships on all levels. So why the ending with the superhero? Does it mean that we're all waiting for superheroes, or are we just hopeless? Or maybe that there's no way to defeat Israel, the monster?
Oh God. Well, to this day, unfortunately, in Lebanon, we're waiting for a miracle. And in the way I kind of knew the ending actually as I was writing from the first moment I conceived the story. I knew I needed this ending, and I knew that I wanted to go into the kid's imagination. Why? The ending, a few things. The way I structured the film is the film starts very mellow and very calm. It's in two parts. The first part is very slow. I make you experience really the weight of a math exam, and you're like, okay. And then the second part of the film is completely, even editorially and structurally, very different, to the point that at the end it's like tightening a noose to the point that it chokes you. And then the robot does quite a few things. First of all, it's Wissam's imagination coming to life. It's love, essentially. It's an ex machina ending in the Greek sense of the word. Where like there's no human solution to this, because it's the magnitude of what is going on is so big, and it's still going on to this day, that we are waiting for a miracle, because this is what it is. And in the film, it was narratively incredibly needed, because the satisfaction of Wissam and Joanna touching their hands, and then the Savior coming through, there's a lot of representations in that emotionally. And plus, it really is, it's really an out not only for the narrative and for the characters and for Wissam in terms of sublimating and going into the imagination, but it's also for the audience. And this is the beauty of cinema also. It's like it enables you to imagine the unimaginable. Basically, this ending somehow changes history for me. It's the wishful history that we never had. So that's, yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the visual structure of the film, because I mean, on one hand, you know, like there is an adherence to a certain type of realism when it comes to relationships, when it comes to, you know, expecting this, you know, like the strike or this impending doom that everybody has been referring to. But there's also, you're still like anchoring most of the film from the point of view of those children with their imagination. And of course there's all kinds of splashes of magical realism that of course accumulates till the end. So how did you manage, or like, just like tell me a little bit more about the visual structure? What were you like intending to do with it? And at the same time, how are you was planning to maintain that balance between keeping it on the ground level of that realism, while at the same time gradually introducing those magical realism splashes that, as I said, that accumulates in the end?
And it was not easy. It was a very, very delicate. It's like a crochet of sorts, you know. It's like you're crocheting something, and you need to make sure that it's like a tableau, and it's like a painting. Like every piece has to fall into place in order to create the final impact and the final emotional impact, because art in general is emotional. Paintings are emotional. We respond to them because of emotion. In terms of structurally, I am. Some people would say that I'm fairly traditional as a filmmaker, and I think I am. And I am a bit classical in terms of broader structure. In terms of the detail, I work on a level where whatever image I'm trying to use and how I structure the image is basically what is I really measure the pressure of an image in terms of how much I can hold the audience in. Because I think if we're to treat, if you're to look at the picture for you can look at a picture for 2 seconds and you see something, and you look at the same photograph for 4 seconds, then you actually suddenly, it causes you to think something else, or suddenly it tells you to think further. And I sort of use that, and I needed to be honest to a narrative that was very realistic throughout the film. And at the same time, with realism, it's hard to press the poeticism that I wanted to also inject into this film, which is through the land, through the sustenance of the images, and through the sounds, and through really somehow I wanted the audience to sink into this world. The first part of the film really is slow on purpose, not slow in a negative way, slow on purpose, because I'm having you slowly sink into the world. And by the time about 40 minutes into the film, suddenly you feel you're inside that world and it's your world and you feel like you want to protect it. And in terms of the images, I specifically lulled the audience into the characters. The differential between the wides and the close shots is very extreme. And the reason it is very extreme is because I'm putting you in that world and then I'm taking you into the characters all at once. It was very hard to balance this. And then the second part of the film, you have less of that, but what you do have is you have an intensity, but you're already so embedded in the characters that you're with them. I didn't need to pull you in even further because now you are the characters. And one thing that I was very concerned about during the process is making sure that each character that comes in and out of the story, even if you meet them for like a few scenes, you feel you are these characters. You're feeling with them. You're not, like for example, when Majid's mother comes in, she takes you, she has a whole sequence. She takes you by storm. She delivers an unbelievable, her interaction with Majid, her son, is so powerful, I think, that it's just like you're in and then you're like, wait a minute, who was this person? But then you know who this person is. So it's like the first part of the film really works to set you up and embed you into the world, and the second part is you completely understanding the world so that it works on an emotional level, and it works you really feel you want to protect this world that's being disrupted. It's paradise and paradise lost, essentially.
We have a couple of more questions, and then we'll have to wrap up. So if anybody have any final questions, please send them to us. Just out of curiosity, how much what is the exact input of the kids? How much of it was improvised, or how also was what was their exact input, and how much was the script modeled after those kid actors?
This goes into the casting process and the training process that I underwent with the kids. And over a period of time, one, I had to learn to trust. There's two worlds that are very, very, very different. And this is something I learned in the process of writing, is that there's the kids' world, and that's complete in and of itself, and if I'm not in the room, these kids will talk to each other a very particular way. But the moment I walk into this room, those kids become kids, and their behavior somehow becomes conscious of an adult's presence in the room, and it becomes different because in their minds, they're used to being judged. My challenge with this was to be able to win these kids' trust enough to be able to have them give me their real world without me being. So how did I get about doing that? We went through a rigorous casting process, cast about 30 kids. Those 30 kids were brought into sort of a workshop space. The workshop space wasn't quote unquote traditional workshop space. It was seeing movies together, hanging out, getting to know each other, creating relationships, figuring out who's who. This is before I told them, you're Joanna, you're Wissam, I had about 4 Joannas, 3 Wissams, and a couple of Majids, and then when this became clear, somehow the class formed itself and they formed the world. But during this whole process, most of the time during the rehearsal, I worked with this wonderful trainer in Lebanon. She helped me coach the kids, and we had to become their friends, like big time. Essentially, most of the rehearsals were with me on the floor and the kids sitting above. so that they're not looking up at me, they're looking down at me. So that's where it starts. And then once the roles were decided, I mean, I did scripts, right? But I really needed I wanted them, like, I gave them the liberty to tell me if something doesn't feel right for them. I gave them the liberty to tell me their crushes, to tell me their love stories, to tell me if they wanted to say something differently. And to be quite honest, I rewrote some of the dialogue specifically for them. Even it kept changing. Even on set, sometimes we had to change stuff so that they felt comfortable saying what they're saying in their own words. So this was important for me, and I think this helped a lot with achieving also the distinction between the adult world and the kids world, which was for me a challenge. And I feel like once we presented this film to kids who were 8 to 12-year-olds in Algeria, this festival specifically for kids, the way the kids responded told me that I did something right, and it was amazing. And then I also gave them license that if they had any ideas on set, they can come to me with them. Like, for example, and I think it's one of the most beautiful moments in the film, it's not my idea, it's actually Wissam's idea, which is basically when we were shooting the soccer scene and the tanks pass, and I had the kids, in my mind, the kids they just stop and freeze. And Wissam was just like, he's like, as we're shooting this, he's like, Walid, like, I think we shouldn't do this. And what do you think we should do? He's like, if this happened and we were at school, we'd run. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. I reset the cameras and I told them, okay, let's do it and do whatever you want. And they did whatever they wanted. And that's what ended up being with the kids kind of all rushing towards the fence. And that was very real. That came from them. That didn't come from me. And what it was is I felt I empowered them enough for them to be honest enough, for them to bring their honesty into these characters. Not to mention that Wissam had a crush on Abir on set as opposed to Joanna and all of this stuff. And there were dates and heartbreaks. And I mean, it was like summer camp for them, really, which was very funny. So, yeah.
We have a comment from the audience. This is Sonia. We really love the film. I appreciated that the narrative so vividly captured the horror and violence of the war without using close-up image of injury or physical violence. And I love the focus on school as the most quotidian place where people find ways to live with and respond to this kind of violence, where they are producing and grappling with Lebanese identity. Crossing imagery and real borders that have been constructed by people who dehumanize children, and where they both navigating their usual social dynamics. Thank you for that. I have one final question for you, not related to the film, or not necessarily related to the actual film, but how does it feel now to be doing this, you know, filmmaker, 1 year into the pandemic? We never, you know, we've known each other for a while, you know, like, I mean, we've met often in festivals, jumping from one screen to the other. This was never our reality. How does it feel now, a year later? Do you miss the cinema? What is missing for you? What did you gain? Like, personally, I'm still like, I'm still adjusting to this. A year later, I still haven't figured this thing out. And how do I feel about it?
I mean, I just think that wherever possible, how do I feel about it? My God, it's been such a tough year. I mean, we lost like 30 festivals in the spring that were supposed to play the film, and we were supposed to be in, some pretty amazing places, but that didn't happen, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. And of course, we couldn't have a proper theatrical. We did have a theatrical release in Lebanon, but the turnout was pretty like COVID impacted, I would say. But the reception in the Middle East and in Lebanon has been pretty wonderful. How do I feel? I mean, I wish every day that I could screen this film projected, because I think it's made for that, and the structure of the image is for that. And that's why, like, about 4 or 5 days ago, I get a note from our distributor saying that the film is actually being projected in New Orleans in a small theater called the Zeitgeist. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. So immediately I'm like telling friends, I'm like, this is an opportunity to see it projected, because it's really rare for that to happen. I mean, I'm grateful on some level, and as Mohanad was saying earlier, which is basically with I wanted to play in the theater, but I know for a fact that if we were only doing a theatrical, a lot of people would not be able to see this film, because this is not the kind of film that would play in any theater. So somehow also the virtual has given people the opportunity and the access to something that they can't. I mean, someone can be watching this in Montana right now, or someone can be watching this in Wyoming. I mean, for me, this is amazing on some level, and that we're having this. Yet, if there's an opportunity to screen the film, of course, and interact with the audience in person, I mean, that would be amazing. So I'm grateful. In general, I'm very grateful for everything, and I just hope like the film sort of reaches people. And I think
it is the human interaction that it comes with.
Yeah, the human interaction would be amazing. So yeah,
I miss that too.
So hopefully COVID will subside. It'll go away tomorrow, like now.
No.
Like now, I want it to go away. Yeah. So
thanks a lot. Thank you, Oualid, and thank you for Etoka Distribution for giving us the opportunity to again screen the movie through Al-Bustan. Thanks everyone who tuned in. Thanks everyone who saw the film. Just a reminder that if you didn't any chance catch the movie and you just came in for the discussion, the movie is available in the US in multiple platforms through Apple and Amazon. You can still watch it.
And it's also in virtual cinema at Lumley in Los Angeles as well, but that's nationwide now at Lumley Theaters. So that's virtual cinema as well.
And that too.
Yeah.
And Oualid, that was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too for coming on. We enjoyed having you. What a rich and thoughtful discussion. We look forward to having you again. Thank you to our audience for tuning in and sending in some really insightful and critical questions. Enjoy your Sunday. Until soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.